Steve, why do you have a suitcase in the hallway? Are you planning to go? Oh, no. No, 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 no. No Texas Hold'em in the workplace. You guys know the rules. Hello and welcome to another episode of Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat, the show where we discuss horror movies. A little bit of housekeeping to take care of right off the bat. We've got a little bit of incident of workplace rule violation here. So here we have Steve's animatronic stunt double, Mr. Fancy, the demonically possessed production assistant, and the newest member of our cast, Professor Edgar Fluffosaurus, Professor of Monsterology, and they are clearly engaged in an illegal game of Texas Hold'em. Now, apparently, me issuing memorandum after memorandum on this subject is not sufficient, so we're going to have to resort to some good old-fashioned shaming. So, Fancy, tell everybody at home that you're sorry.
I thought the rule was just no blackjack.
No, the rule is no gambling of any kind. No cards, no dice, no roulette wheels, no death pools. Steve the Cat is a compulsive gambler, and if you gamble in front of him, he immediately dips into my retirement savings and charters a flight to Vegas, and I have to work another 5 years to retire. This has to stop, so now I need you to apologize.
I'm sorry.
That's better. Anything else you'd like to add?
This is humiliating.
All right. Yeah, you always just go with the crowd, but I expected better from you. You are a credentialed academic. You should know better.
My apologies to everyone here for my vulgar behavior. I was only trying to make a little bit of scratch. Daddy needs a new pair of shoes.
Well, that's a pretty nice apology, but I'm still very disappointed in you. Anything else you'd like to add?
Although it pains me to make accusations, I am very confident that Mr. Fancy cheats at cards.
You know, that's entirely possible, but that's not my problem. Anyway, we need to put an end to this. Let's get to tonight's episode. We're doing a couple of movies tonight featuring masked slashers. Should be a lot of fun, so let's get to this episode of Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat. All right, it's once again time for Steve's vocabulary lesson. This is the part of the show where we come up with new and creative words in an attempt to stay ahead of social media bots and algorithms that would otherwise try to ban us. Word number 1 for this week, tangerining. This is a noun, meaning the action of removing the outer covering of a character, typically in a manner that leaves the outer covering intact, or at least mostly intact. Now, this term, the typical usage refers to actions involving the character's noggin. And just as a final note, okay, they can't all be winners, but, this sounds much more sophisticated than peeling. Our second word for this week, fonduing. Now, fonduing actually appears in sources like Urban Dictionary, referring to time spent with the object of your romantic affection, and that's taken from the 2011 Captain America movie. As much as I love Captain America, we don't accept that definition here. Here, fonduing refers to the action of sticking a character on the end of a long fork. Now, colloquial forms of this term include frog gigging and kermiting. Please keep these terms in mind, they'll come up later in the episode. Before we go any farther in this episode, I wanted to take a moment and talk about director Robert Green Hall, who directed the movie Laid to Rest, which we will be reviewing in today's episode. We started work on this episode. I had put the review of Laid to Rest in the can, and then we received word that director Robert Green Hall had tragically died at a young age, and I did not want to put this episode out there without at least taking a minute to pay our respects to Robert Green Hall. So, Robert Green Hall was born in Detroit, Michigan in 1973, and he is well known as a special effects artist and film director. I won't say he got his very first job working for Roger Corman, but much of his early work was performed on low-budget films working for Roger Corman, and a lot of people don't understand the really valuable role that people like Roger Corman play in the filmmaking ecosystem by providing an environment for young directors, young special effects artists to really make their bones and get their foot on the first rung of the ladder in the filmmaking industry. Robert Green Hall was just one of the many who are from the Roger Corman School of Filmmaking. I believe even James Cameron worked for Roger Corman very early in his career. More recently, he was the owner of Posthuman FX, the special effects shop, a very well-known and well-respected special effects shop. His special effects appeared all over the place. He was a very, very well-respected special effects artist. Just a few places you might have seen his work were on Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the movie Prom Night, and that would be the more recent remake, obviously not the original from the 1980s. Paranormal Activity Parts 2 and 3, and many, many others, too many to mention on one slide. As a director, he directed the movie Laid to Rest, which we will be reviewing today. He also directed Chrome Skull, Laid to Rest 2, the sequel, and worked as a director on the Teen Wolf TV series. Robert Green Hall passed away far too soon. Our deepest condolences to his family, to his friends, and all those who loved him from those of us here at Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat. So our first movie for tonight is called Laid to Rest. And you see the poster right there. This is a slasher movie that was released in the year 2009. It was directed by Robert Green Hall, and the cast includes Bobby Sue Luther, Kevin Gage, Sean Whalen, and Lena Headey. Yes, Cersei Lannister herself. My least favorite actress on earth. In my opinion, she was far and away the worst thing about Game of Thrones. I think she has all the charisma of a glass of milk. I've never been a fan of Lena Headey. You will not see us doing a tribute to Lena Headey on Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat. She's not bad in this movie. I will give her that. So let's talk a bit about Laid to Rest. There is the awesome poster right there. Let's do a film summary. So this is a slasher movie that takes place in an undisclosed rural southern location, presumably Georgia. We know that because, or we can assume that because later on in the movie you encounter some characters who are on their way to Atlanta. They're on a road trip, so, presumably this could be Alabama or Florida, but I'm gonna guess that it was in Georgia. As the movie opens, you have a young woman who wakes up in a casket with no memory of who she is or how she got there. Now, as the movie goes on, her memory's going to come back a little bit, but especially early in the movie, it's going to seem to you like it's almost a little bit overboard where she just doesn't know how to do anything. And I want you to cut her some slack because as the movie goes on, what you're going to learn is that she has actually suffered a pretty substantial head injury, and she's probably nursing a really, really nasty concussion. And that's why her memory is kind of screwy, and that's why she's just having trouble doing basic things, but she gets stronger as the movie goes on. Now, almost immediately after getting out of the casket, she is set upon by a killer wearing a chrome skull mask and who carries a vicious-looking knife and a video camera. She does manage to escape, and in the course of her escape, she meets up with one and then another local, and the two locals attempt to help her, thus placing themselves in the killer's crosshairs. As the movie unfolds, we find out that the killer is responsible for many, many disappearances of young women, and that he has established a playground in this rural area. He's kind of staked out this area because it's far enough away from the city, there's no cell service, there's really not a whole lot of police presence, so he can pretty much have his way with his victims at his leisure without having to worry about a whole lot of law enforcement. So that presents a problem for the lady who has woken up in the casket and her two friends. One interesting thing about this movie is that although the lead actress's memory, the lead actress or the lead character played by Bobby Sue Luther, her memory slowly begins to come back, and we do find out bits and pieces about her. We never truly find out who she is. She's often referred to in this movie as the woman with no name. This is a really, really good movie. This is a really good example of the slasher serial killer genre. Now, this is not the biggest budget movie you've ever seen, and it's not A-list acting, it's not bad acting, it's kind of middle-of-the-road actors. I'm looking at my notes that I took on this movie, and I specifically said it punches above its weight. It's one of those movies where the whole is better than the sum of the parts, even though they didn't have a huge budget necessarily to work with, and it's not necessarily, Olivier caliber actors. They produced a really compelling movie that I really enjoyed. So let's talk about the villain profile. They never really give him a name in the movie. There is a sequel to this movie, and they call him Chrome Skull. In this movie, they do find a registration in an automobile that belongs to the killer, and it contains the name Jesse Chromenes, so we assume that that's his name, but we're going to call him Chrome Skull for the purposes of this episode. And there you see him right there with his signature knives and his video camera. He belongs to the slasher serial killer class. His special powers, well, he's more or less a guy. His special powers are he does have some pretty significant resistance to pain. He does have some pretty terrific proficiency with knives, and he is, as we discover as the movie goes along, presumably he is very wealthy. His signature weapon is a clip-point monosteel hunting knife with a sawback, knuckle duster, and nonsensical transverse saw blades that the special effects team presumably thought looked cool but would be a hindrance in real life. You can see the knives there. I'm assuming it's monosteel. I don't see a Damascus pattern, and you wouldn't do like a Sanmai construction in something with a saw back like that, so I'm going to assume this is just a high-carbon monosteel knife. His signature technique includes stabbing, slashing, and denoggening his victims. So that's our villain profile for the movie Laid to Rest. So let's get to the scorecard for our first feature for tonight, Laid to Rest. Kills, 11, plus many dead bodies. There are a lot of dead bodies that are the result of off-screen killings that occurred before the movie starts, so there's a lot of dead bodies, but the movie itself, you get 11 kills. Bare breasts, 3, plus, again, many dead bodies. Car chases, none. The movie does involve a good bit of traveling around by car, but there's really nothing that you would call a car chase. It's more of, can we get to this location before this guy gets to that location, and so on. Being in a rural location, every location in the movie is pretty far away from every other location, so a good bit of the movie is just spent traveling by car. Denoggenings, 5, plus many dead bodies, many of which have been denoggened. Possumings, Zero, but there are two near misses, or you could say it's one near miss of two people, but I'm going to call it two near misses. Granny corpse puppetry. Yes, that means exactly what it sounds like. Granny corpse puppetry. Fortunately, it only happens once, but it does happen. Balloon cranioplasty denoggenings. There is one of those. That is included in the 5 from the denoggenings total above. So one of those 5 denoggenings is a balloon cranioplasty denoggening. And you might be wondering, what is a balloon cranioplasty denoggening? Well, just watch the movie and it will become obvious to you. And finally, guys with Iron Maiden logos on their shoes, despite the fact that they're singing along to dance music while on the way to a rave in a Prius. Oh, yes, there is one of those. This is a good movie. This is a good movie with a cast that you will actually root for. This is not a movie where you're going to root for the killer. This is a movie where you're actually going to want to see the cast survive. Except for this guy with the Iron Maiden logos on the shoes. Now, he does not have a big enough role in the movie for me to formally categorize him as Jar Jar Binksian, but oh my god. Iron Maiden logo on the shoes, and as they're driving along in their Prius, they're dancing and singing along to a song that, I kid you not, the lyrics are, "Sexy bitches are my favorite kind of bitches." I am not making that up. That is really what they're singing, and yet he has Iron Maiden logos on his shoes. They needed to kill this guy, resurrect him, and kill him again. So, Steve's final score for Laid to Rest. We're going to give it 3 paws out of 4. This is a really good slasher movie. It rises above a modest budget, and you will want to actually root for the cast of characters. That's kind of the, to me, the dividing line between whether something's an okay slasher movie or a good slasher movie. If it's a good slasher movie, you'll actually find yourself compelled by the cast members, and you'll actually kind of want them to succeed, and that's the case in this movie. Now, I'm going to throw a little addendum in here. There is a sequel to this called Chrome Skull Laid to Rest 2. If you watch Laid to Rest, and if you enjoy Laid to Rest, I am going to strongly recommend that you do not watch the sequel. Without getting into too many details, let me tell a story. Many, many years ago, a director named Ridley Scott made a really awesome sci-fi movie called Alien. And years later, another director named James Cameron did a follow-up to Alien called Aliens that was also outstanding. And then the studio got the idea, wow, we've got the makings of a franchise here. Let's rush out another sequel. Well, when you rush out another sequel, a lot of the times the cast members are not available. And so the makers of this movie called Alien 3 just decided, oh, well, we'll just kill off everybody who's not available to appear in the sequel. Thus, Alien 3 earns itself a special place in hell as quite possibly the worst movie ever made. Not because it's necessarily the worst movie ever made in terms of writing or production values or acting, but because it retroactively ruined an outstanding movie that came before it by basically killing off everybody that was in it and making the movie pointless. The sequel to Laid to Rest, I'm not going to say is exactly the same thing, but it has kind of the same problem that not everybody was available. So there's going to be some people that you're rooted for in Laid to Rest, and they just had to figure out what to do in the sequel, and they wrote them all out in a way that's not really satisfying. So I'm going to leave it there. Definitely see Laid to Rest. Definitely avoid the sequel, Chrome Skull Laid to Rest 2. So that's Steve's take on Laid to Rest. Let's get to the second film in our double feature for this week. Our second film is called The Mask Maker. There you see the poster right there. This is a slasher movie with a supernatural element to it. This was released in the year 2011. It is directed by Griff First. And the cast includes Nikki DeLoach, Stephen Coletti, Annabella Casanova, Ross Britz, Terry Kaiser, Mariah Bonner, AJ Allegra, Laura Grice, and there are a few others as well. And one other note on this, when this was originally released, it was called Masquerade. If you're looking for this on streaming services today, you'll find it as Mask Maker. It's possible if you're looking through old DVD copies, you might stumble across it under the title Masquerade. So there's the poster for Mask Maker. The tagline is Meet Your Maker. Let's do a quick film summary. So this is a slasher film with supernatural elements. It takes place in rural Texas, although it was filmed in Louisiana. This is one of a growing number of horror movies that has been filmed in the Louisiana area. The gist of the movie is a college student buys a 19th century farmhouse and 40 acres of land as a birthday gift for his longtime girlfriend. Nice guy. He was able to get a great deal on the house because of the homestead's sad, mysterious past, which, in all honesty, he did not know that much about when he bought the house. The two have a plan to flip the house and put the profits towards their future together. The girlfriend, at least, is like an economics major, business major. We don't find out exactly what her major is, but she's really into finance and investing. So their idea is to do this as a business venture. So for her birthday weekend, 4 friends come to stay with them for a weekend of fun and flipping. Unfortunately, they accidentally break the spell that had been used to imprison a cursed killer. The killer then stalks them one by one, stealing the faces of his victims and using them to cover his own deformed face. So let's talk a bit about the villain profile for this movie. The villain's name is Leonard Beaumont, and I'm guessing on the last name there, his mother's last name is Beaumont. They never actually give his last name, so we're just going to go with Leonard Beaumont. There you see a picture of him as a young child there with his face that does not look so bad right now. It gets worse and worse as he gets older and older due to a spreading infection that they just can't cure. He is a supernaturally powered slasher. His special powers are, well, being supernaturally powered, he's unkillable. And he also has amazing proficiency with an axe. His signature weapon is a woodsman's axe. Now, he does not use a woodsman's axe exclusively, but as you watch the movie, you'll see that given his preference, he will use a woodsman's axe. And his signature technique involves tangerining and often denoggening his victims, and then donning the peel. So that's the villain profile for The Mask Maker. All right, let's get to the scorecard for our second feature for this evening, The Mask Maker. Kills 13, and I've said 13 plus more assumed. There is one scene in the movie where it just seems implausible that the killer could have gotten from point A to point B without killing more people, but we don't know exactly how many, we don't know exactly how it would have occurred. It all happens off screen, so we're going to call it 13 plus more assumed. Bare breasts. Yeah, there's 4, plus there's also some no-bra t-shirt action and a little bit of side boob getting in and out of the t-shirt. Denoggenings. 3, including a pig. If you recall what we talked about earlier, Leonard Beaumont's favorite toy is a woodsman's axe, and he does swing for the fences a couple of times. Ensnappinatings. 2. Fonduings. Putting the character on the end of a long fork, or if you prefer, frog-gigging or kermiting. 3. Deus Ex Nada. Going back a couple of episodes for this one. There's one of those. Michael Berryman sightings. I'm going to say multiple now. Michael Berryman is just a legend in the horror movie community. Even if you don't know him, you do know him because you know his face. He's famous for having been in movies such as The Hills Have Eyes, for example. In this movie, he actually plays a good guy. He plays a kindly general store owner. The first time I watched this movie, I could have sworn I counted 3 Michael Berryman sightings. When I rewatched it last night, I recall seeing 2. In fairness to myself, when I rewatch a movie for this show, I'm usually working on something else simultaneously, either for my day job or for another episode of the show. So maybe I missed one, but there are at least 2 Michael Berryman sightings in this movie. And finally, worst episode of House Hunters ever. Actually, no, but we'll get to that film at a later date. So, with your viewing of The Mask Maker, you also get some bonus features, including Treat Williams has been adjusted for inflation. Now, that's kind of harsh. Treat Williams has been around for a long time, and frankly, he's not gained that much weight, but he has been adjusted for inflation a little bit in this film. Misogynistic college professors. Yeah, you'll want to see him die, and he doesn't. He's just a bit player who only has one line of dialogue, but still. World's worst utility company hookup guy. I mean, he's just super creepy. You won't feel bad about seeing him get polished off. Impromptu witch trials, and who doesn't love those? Never pull out the stake. I mean, that's just common sense. I'm sorry. If it takes a stake to kill somebody, you don't ever pull it back out. You get barn sex. Did not know that women were into barn sex, but apparently they are. You get more barn sex. Yes, 2 different women, 2 different incidents of barn sex in this movie. And finally, I would like the ladies to sound off in the comments on this last bullet. What is the deal with actresses leaving the bra on during sex? There is a scene in this movie where, okay, my first thought was maybe she didn't want to show herself topless, and so she got her agent to agree to let her do the sex scene with the bra on. But she still got the guy grinding away on top of her and practically motorboating her, and then she does show everything off later, getting in and out of the bathtub. So I don't get it. What is the deal with leaving the bra on during sex? Every chef has his recipe, I assume, but to me, that just seems like somebody has skipped a couple of steps. And the only thing I can think is maybe barn sex, with all the straw is just a little bit pokey, and so they got her to leave the bra on because of that. But I'd really like to hear some more about that in the comments because I just don't get it. So our final score for The Mask Maker. We're going to give this one 2.5 paws out of 4. It is a formulaic but above average entry into the masked slasher genre. If you like Friday the 13th or Halloween, you'll probably enjoy it. I have watched this movie several times, and I have enjoyed it every time, but I cannot come up with anything about it that says, wow, this is what makes this movie more special than other movies. It's like the baseball player that does everything well, but he's not a Hall of Fame caliber player. It's just a solid masked killer movie. If you enjoy Friday the 13th type movies, you should enjoy this one. So that's Steve's final score for The Mask Maker. Well, we're almost to the end of yet another episode, but before we go, as we do every week, let's talk about some other stuff Steve watched this week. Number 1, Soul Survivors. In this movie, college students begin to experience paranormal weirdness after a tragic auto accident. Now, this is a PG-13 teenage girl-friendly horror movie featuring Eliza Dushku, so it's one of those mass market releases that's basically put out there so high school girls can feel like they've watched a horror movie without actually watching an honest-to-God horror movie. I would say even judged on those criteria, it's below average and easy to figure out the twist at the end. I would avoid this one. It's just not that good. I mean, if you've got a teenage daughter or granddaughter or niece or what have you who's looking for something that's got kind of horror movie elements, it's not a bad choice. I think the whole Happy Death Day to Me and Happy Death Day to Me 2 are much better examples of the same kind of genre, but there you go. Second movie, Head Game. In this movie, a hot yoga teacher is roofied. Then she wakes up in a locked building with a camera stuck to her head, along with an assortment of folks in similar condition, and they then have to compete against each other to try to escape from the locked building. So it's kind of a low-budget mashup of The Hunger Games and Saw. I would say it was predictable and formulaic. I would also say it was not bad, but I would say it was nothing special. So it's a solidly middle of the road entry. It's nothing good. It's nothing bad. It's nothing exceptional, either exceptionally good or exceptionally bad. It's kind of filler material. Finally, what I've been meaning to watch for a while, Rubber. An abandoned car tire becomes sentient, develops telekinetic powers, and goes on a rampage. I'm going to say that again in case it didn't sink in the first time around. An abandoned car tire, yes, one of those black rubber things that your car rolls around on, becomes sentient, develops telekinetic powers, and goes on a rampage. Now, if you think this is a serious subject for a movie, you are wrong. This is an intentionally absurd comedy that has fun with things that happen for no reason, and they hit you up with that right up front. So it's actually a very clever and very funny comedy if you're in the mood for a clever comedy. It's actually much more sophisticated than you would think based upon this description. It's even got a bit of a cabin in the woods type movie within a movie feel, in that you've got the events of the movie going on, and there's also a group of spectators off on another part of the same area watching through binoculars. So basically you've got the movie unfolding, you've got live spectators watching the movie unfold. We're not sure exactly what the story is behind the live spectators, but there's a storyline that unfolds involving the live spectators in addition to the storyline with the abandoned tire itself, and the stories start to kind of merge in and out, and it's just a lot of fun if you're in the mood for a clever comedy. Now, that said, it is a clever comedy. It is not an uproariously fall-on-your-face hysterical comedy, so there's not lots of sex jokes and poop jokes and things like that. It's more for people that like Monty Python. If you're a Monty Python fan, you'll really enjoy this. If you're the kind of person who can't wait for Jim Carrey's next offering, you might want to skip this one. But anyway, that's some other stuff Steve watched this week. Well, that wraps it up for another episode of Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat. I am Carl the Camera Monkey, your narrator. On behalf of everyone here at Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat, thanks for joining us. And I'm sorry the curiosity is getting to me. I just have to know who was going to win this hand. Let's see what we got here. An unmatched 2 and a 7. That's the worst hand imaginable. You are terrible at this. All right, animatronic stunt double. Let's see what you got. Queen high, but that doesn't really help you with 2 3s and a 5 on the table. How about you, Fancy? A 3 and a 10, 3 of a kind. I'll be darned, I think you do cheat at cards. Well, that's everything for now. Bye-bye, everybody. Well, as you can see, Steve is still on a catnip high right now. I had to go bail him out from downtown Vegas. He had too much catnip, picked a fight with one of Siegfried and Roy's white lions, punched it right in the mouth, got arrested. It's now the second casino that's banned him. Anyway, he'll be over this in a couple of hours. Anyway, that's all for this week's episode of Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat. Hope you've had a great time. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.
This is Mr. Applewhite speaking. there is nothing wrong with your device. Join me here on Psycho Bunny DC. A delightfully dreadful consternation of horror content. Use your head and free your mind.